Welcome back. The time is 20 minutes before the top of the hour 9. You're still tuned in to News and Views with myself, Salalo Makwidiri. And thank you so much for staying with us on News and Views. And in a bit, we'll be turning our focus into something very, very interesting. In his latest midterm budget speech, which was yesterday, Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana reintroduced a significant initiative which is aimed at cutting government costs, an early retirement plan for public sector employees. This program, which targets workers aged 55 to 59, seeks to reduce the country's rising public sector wage bill while encouraging a generational shift in the workforce. This move, slated to cost almost 11 billion rand over the next 2 fiscal years, is part of government's larger plan to manage fiscal pressure while also bringing younger, skilled professionals into the civil services. And for insights into this new plan and what it means for South Africa's budget and employment, particularly you, if you're someone that's working in the public sector, I think this should be a really insightful conversation that you're going to have to listen to. And to help us dissect all of that, we'll be joined by Yaseen Badat. He's a financial executive advisor from Liberty Group, and he'll provide an in-depth analysis of the potential financial and economic impacts of this new suggested move. Yaseen, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Always a pleasure having you.
Brother Salil, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you and the listeners. Thank you very much for having me on air this morning. And I must say that I'm not an economist. Let me clear that up. And there are probably others who are far more qualified to give a better opinion. So I'm happy to share my thoughts this morning, inshallah.
No, definitely. Thank you so much. I think we'll just start off maybe with the basics, and some specifics on this early retirement plan that has been suggested by the finance minister, and what you make of it. And I think there was a similar program which was attempted back in 2019, and how maybe the two compare to each other.
Well, I mean, listen, if you think about, first of all, the midterm budget statement, which is such a critical thing, and I think for me, I like to talk in very simple language to get our message across in as easy a way as possible. You know, a midterm budget is effectively the Minister of Finance, Honorable Enoch Godongwana, looking at where we are mid-year approximately from February when the budget was effectively announced, and what measures are on track or rather not on track, or what adjustments have to be made to keep us on track. And the midterm budget generally looks at the economy at a macro level and a micro level over the next 3 years as an indication to see whether any major changes or material changes need to be made, either where revenue collection is concerned, or debt management is concerned, or various aspects of the economy are concerned, to make sure that the outlook for South Africa from a South African economic point of view is quite healthy. So I think very commendable. We have a very, very sturdy and stable Minister of Finance in the Honorable Mr. Enoch Godongwana. And I think having him at the helm of that particular portfolio immediately gives us great confidence that the ship is being steered in the right direction. And if we have the support from government and the support from the private sector, which is effectively what we're hoping to achieve, I think that the future and the outlook looks very positive for the country and for the economy. If you look at your opening remarks around government employees and the initiative to effectively reduce that particular number or offer people that particular incentive, it shows that the government wage bill, so to speak, represents a very healthy part of the budget. So government is spending a significant portion of the budget on an annual basis in remunerating state employees in various sectors. So this particular move is a very welcome move to be able to say, listen, guys, for those of you that are within a certain age band, there would be incentives, or there would be an allowance offered for you to be able to part ways with state in a very amicable manner, to consider retirement options, such that that wage burden is ultimately reduced to a point, and then government would then look at replenishing those particular vacancies with younger workforce, younger energetic individuals. And I think that seeks to address another problem in our budget, in that we have a young, dynamic, educated, academic workforce coming out of varsity, a population rather coming out of varsity, but don't have any immediate work opportunities. So it's almost a scenario where, listen, we're going to try and find a balance where we let the guys that want to retire peacefully, move away and replace that with obviously a younger generation of employees that are geared at obviously taking the country forward in the right direction.
And one thing that really stood out for me is the Treasury estimating that around 30,000 public servants may apply for this early retirement, and ultimately, it might yield around 2 billion in annual savings. How significant would this be in terms of long-term financial relief for South Africa's economy, which has not been growing as quickly as we would have thought, particularly in the second quarter of the year?
Well, if you look at the key focus points that the honourable minister looked at, I mean, point number one was around debt stabilization and ensuring that is managed. Point number two was the potential for giving relief to the South African public. Infrastructure investments, very, very important. And obviously, where taxes are concerned, there weren't too many changes there. But this is a very significant point because ultimately it drives the message of the minister very, very clearly that ultimately we are going to effectively make change happen in a very gradual and focused way. Now, if you look at this particular initiative, effectively bringing back approximately 2 billion rand into the fiscus, I mean, every cent counts, right? And that's what the minister is saying. That's exactly why he's talking about reprioritizing spending across different departments where necessary. And we've already seen that, So he hasn't been, or the minister hasn't been as we may have potentially seen in the past. They haven't just been giving money away freely. They've been obviously making sure that they look after the purse very tightly. They keep the purse preserved such that anything that happens beyond this point can happen in a very gradual and measured manner. So, I mean, for these 30,000 employees, for example, you're now going to have a significant portion of that particular working population in state who will now have access to the retirement funding packages, the retirement options, which means that in some way, shape or form, that will also now contribute additional value to the fiscus, because we understand that whenever monies are accessed from retirement funds, pension funds, provident funds, whatever it might be, there is an element of taxation depending on how much members elect to take. So government are looking at it from with a very dual lens. That on the one way, listen, we'll offer this relief to the population, or to a significant population, part of the population within our public service. But at the same time, the revenue generation there will effectively add to the fiscus as well. And more importantly, those particular members will have some sort of financial independence around spending and contributing and putting money back into the economy as well. And I think that's important. I think when the minister assesses any move, especially where the budget is concerned and the team behind him, it's important to make sure that the cycle of money remains very relevant, not only from an individual's point of view, but how can that effectively add added value to the fiscus. So that 2 billion rand may not sound like a lot of money when you look at our GDP at almost 7 trillion, but again, every cent definitely counts.
No, definitely. And this plan, it is estimated that around 11 billion rand will be required in upfront costs. Could this expenditure have any kind of consequences for other sectors in need of urgent funding, like education? We've seen, how the education sector, has been complaining and crying to Treasury about their budget and how it has been slashed throughout the years. You have healthcare also, which is not at its best. When it comes to, the military, also their budget has also been slashed to an extent. So just qualitatively, looking at the impact, wouldn't it have made sense to spread the 11 billion rands across all the other, sectors and departments, if I can put it that way?
No, of course. I mean, listen, again, if we look at the numbers and we look at education currently, I think that receives about the highest budget where this particular conversation is had. Most definitely. I think there are other areas within the economic sphere, especially where government is concerned, that could most definitely need that money. Health is critical at the moment. Policing is critical at the moment. Education does receive the lion's share of the budget, but that's equally critical at the moment. We've seen the current state of our schools, the current state of our education facilities available to the majority of our learners. So yes, the argument is that perhaps maybe that money could be spent a little bit better in other sectors, but again, when you look at the budget, I mean, it's a very it's a very intimate look from the minister to try and juggle. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to be very conservative, but at the same time, they're looking for solutions. So the one solution could perhaps maybe be, in my opinion, let's take that 11 billion and spread it everywhere else, which is possible, very plausible. But the other one is to say, listen, we've got this problem, and this problem is that we have a public servant force that is currently overweight. And I think most people that are specialists in this industry will agree that that remains a significant chunk of government's budget. So for as long as you have that overburdened public services employment workforce, you're going to always have an issue every year in terms of, listen, how do we now juggle the numbers? Especially now, remember, we haven't even come to conversations around wage increases, for example. So every year that number gets exponentially more critical and becomes more heavy, more top heavy from a budget point of view. So I think the minister's intention is effectively to find a way to reduce that number significantly, such that it doesn't become this burgeoning problem that hangs over this budget and this economy on an annual basis.
No, definitely. And just in closing, this was a very, very significant midterm budget. It was the first one since the government of national unity came to be. Just overall, what did you make of it? Did the minister, strike that balancing act that everyone was talking about? Is it what we thought it would be? And are you confident going forward into the next year?
Well, I mean, listen, if you look at the government of national unity a few months into the process at the moment, I think most South Africans can say that it actually turned out better than we expected. I mean, that's the reality of the situation. There seems to be some sense of camaraderie and some sense of working relationships between the different parties. And that's very welcome because, I mean, it talks to accountability. It talks to making sure that obviously things are done in a more accountable fashion, detailed manner. But if you look at the three priorities that the GNU had effectively outlined initially, to drive growth and to create job creation, which was number one, to reduce poverty and tackle the high cost of living, which was number two, and to build a capable and ethical development state. Now take those three principles, for example, tie that into the budget, and we can see very, very nicely that the budget in summary spoke about just that. I mean, debt stabilization in South Africa is a problem. I mean, currently we have north of 70% of our GDP being spent on government debt. I mean, Brother Selelo, that number, I mean, for the ordinary South African like you and I, if you have to quantify that number, government is currently spending more than R1 billion a day servicing debt. I mean, imagine R1 billion, and that's servicing the debt, not paying off the debt.
Servicing that's a lot.
So it's a staggering number, and I think that number is going to become gradually higher as the years go on. I think it's close to about 380 billion rands to service approximately to service government debt. Like I said, more than R1 billion a day. That's a phenomenal number. So the minister's priority is, listen, we need to bring this to get this debt stabilized to a point where it becomes more affordable, and I think that's very important. So his moves in terms of adjusting, refocusing, reprioritizing is to address that. The other thing that was a very welcome point for me, and this talks to one of the GNU resolutions, is to effectively make lives a bit better for ordinary South Africans like you and I. We've seen inflation being sort of kept within the target range, which is very good. That obviously talks to interest rates coming down, which means that now all of a sudden the ordinary South African has more money in their pocket to effectively pay off debt, be it short-term loans, bonds, vehicle finance arrangements, whatever it might be. So all of a sudden you find there is a little bit of relief for the ordinary South African. The only problem there that I find may be an issue is with the geopolitical issues we're having around the world, especially around the Middle Eastern conversation, the Russia-Ukraine region, where price of oil, etc., is concerned. We really don't know where the fuel price is going to be in the next couple of months. And that is a concern because the fuel price is a big number in that inflation basket when looked at from a real inflation point of view. So that's something that we'll keep our eyes on. And inshallah, we make dua that inshallah Allah Ta'ala let the best happen, especially in the Middle East. When you look at tax, I mean, it was very pleasing that they don't foresee any tax hikes, which is good. I don't think the South African consumer, the South African working person can afford to actually be burdened with any more taxation. Taxation at the highest end is almost 45%. You look at VAT at 15%. You look at the fuel levy. You look at all the various parts of how government is actually taking money from the ordinary consumer. I think it was very wise of them to say, listen, guys, enough for now, right? We don't need to get more money from the consumer. But what that does also mean is that it means that over the next 2 or 3 years, the estimation in terms of revenue collection is going to be lowered. They're talking about 20 odd billion rand lower in the next financial year and the financial year thereafter. So obviously they've understood that, listen, we can't ask the public for more. We have to now work with what we have to effectively deliver an outcome. And the outcome is obviously to make sure that we're steering the economy in the right direction. And the last thing in the budget speech that was quite interesting, and I think just to summarize well, was infrastructure investment. So government have understood that, listen, we have to take money, we have to start spending, we've got to obviously put money back into the economy, back into capital in projects to ensure that we can increase our infrastructure in the country. Because with infrastructure investment comes job creation, comes stability, comes economic stability, and everything else thereafter. So I think the 4 critical points to summarize: infrastructure investments, very important. No major tax hikes for the South African public, which was good. An outlook where interest rates are going to be a bit more stabilized, meaning that the consumer now has a little bit more in their pockets, which is fantastic. And obviously debt stabilization for the government, which is very important. I think that, in my mind, summarizes the critical points. But I think to gel all this together, it's important to note that the minister was very frugal and he was very measured in his discourse. And he specifically said that, listen, I mean, this is going to be a plan in motion. I mean, GDP at the moment, approximately 1.1% when the minister spoke in February, revised to about 1.3%. So we're not at a point where we can say, listen, everything's working, alhamdulillah. We obviously know that it's a gradual move to effectively stabilize and move the economy forward. And I think that's what we saw with the minister's address yesterday.
All right. I think we're going to leave it there, Yaseen. Thank you so much for unpacking it. I think, in the easiest terms, so that ordinary South Africans like you and I and others who might not have, intricate knowledge on, the financial jargon that the minister might have used can understand it. So really, really appreciate you for that. And Jazakallah for giving us your time. Really appreciate it. Assalamu alaikum.
Salam wa rahmatullah. Salam to you and the listeners. Thank you for having me once again. Have a lovely day, inshallah. Take care.
Jazakallah so much. That was
financial
advisor. And just unpacking the midterm budget by the Honorable Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana, and also unpacking the bold, early retirement plan that he has put out for those that are in the latter stages of their working careers and those that are working in the public sector, that retirement plan. So if you do work in the retirement plan, I think this conversation was no, not in the retirement plan. If you do work in the public service industry, this one is definitely for you. And just to know and understand what the finance minister was talking about yesterday in his midterm budget. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues, and we'll be speaking to Masara Rijab, and we'll be talking about the United for Justice protest that they have for South African Lebanese community, and this is happening I think this next weekend. So keep it locked to Salam Media for that right after this.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood. The whole neighborhood is already destroyed. More than 17 towers are down. Here, as you can see, the firefighters trying their best to help. The people are still under the rubble. A lot of the people.
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never before seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Sha'alan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments. Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of the conversation.